Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. And welcome to the first annual meeting of AirObs, the Airport Observatory. So my name is Rosário Macário. I'm professor in Portugal, in Lisbon, and University of Lisbon, and also in the University of Antwerp. And I'm opening this session to let you know about AirObs. So AirObs is a network of observation of airports with the aim of spreading the knowledge about the airports and discussing the main issues that are affecting the airports. As you know, most events and most networks are dedicated to the big airports. So we want to cover that gap by focusing on medium-sized and small-sized airports and discussing the most important issues that are currently being a hurdle for the airports. So our network will be joining you in several opportunities. We will be offering some seminars and we will be offering also some research reports. So our objective is only to spread the knowledge about airport research and to have the opportunity to let you know what we have done in terms of research in our universities. We are currently a group of universities, an international group from Portugal, from Belgium, from Brazil, and that will soon be joined by other countries and other universities. And our objective is to have the representation of the different parts of the world. So we will be doing at least one annual meeting, and we will be doing several seminars. The seminars will be announced soon, and the objective of the seminars is to bring you our research outputs and to discuss those outputs with experienced people. So in every seminar, we will have someone presenting the research, and normally one of our colleagues. And after that, we will have two discussants, one from the academic world, another one from the industry world. And so this is the way we have planned to start and to create this forum of discussion. So you will have our contacts, and we would very much appreciate if you want to join us in our different events. So today we are here with a very specific topic. So a topic that is today a problem for all airports in the world. So it's a universal problem that is the COVID and the post-COVID scenario. So the effects that the COVID produced in the air transport industry. And so today we have as our keynote speech Mr. Dario Lopes, who will be talking to us about airport infrastructure investment policy after COVID. Mr. Dario has been Secretary of State in Brazil. He is still very much involved in government. And we have invited three very different discussants. So one discussant comes from ICAO, the other one comes from the European Investment Bank, and the other one is coming from a consultant company with considerable experience in Brazilian infrastructure. So the discussants are then Saulo da Silva, Tiago Lopes, and Tiago Nykiel. So I will not delay you any further. I'm sure you will be very curious for listening our keynote speech. I have the pleasure then to introduce you to Professor Dario Lopes, who will be giving a lecture on airport challenges in the post-COVID scenario, infrastructure investment policy after COVID. So Professor Dario, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to talk about airports and air transportation. I would like to register the pleasure to meet my colleague Rosário Macário again, albeit online, but Rosário is a very important reference for all professionals in the transport area. And I would like to do a special greeting to Professor Jorge Miguel Reis Silva, who has been fundamental to my postdoctoral research. The theme of our meeting is broad, and I am working on it hardly in the last 2 years. To cover this topic with more academic approach, I intend to start with a vision of the market. After that, some considerations about OPEX, about revenues, and finally, some words about trends on CAPEX. All of this, I will try to do a special approach to the Brazilian reality. Most of you probably heard over 1,000 times that COVID is the event with the greatest impact in the history of civil aviation. And you can put the next one, please. As you can see, nothing compares to the impact of the pandemic. According to IATA International, passenger demand in 2020 was 75% below 2019. Capacity declined almost 20% in international services, and load factor fell about 20 percentage points from 2020 to 2019. Domestic demand in 2020 down almost 50% compared with 2019. The consequence, next please, the consequence for the airport industry was a reduction about 40% in the CAPEX, a loss of over $100 billion in the total revenue. That means you lost more than half the total revenue you have in 2019. But on the side, the OPEX was reduced between 20 to 40%. To be worse, the capital cost from 19 to 20 increased. So the situation is very, very, very challenging. Despite some recent good news, the global passenger in 2021 is still expected to reach only half of what was in 2019. Probably will reach something like 4.6 billion passengers, compared with the 9.2 billion passengers we had in 2019. Next, please. The path to recover this has proven to be more difficult than the initial perception. This slide represents an ACI study for the global market. This study indicates that the 2019 level will be recovered in 2024. Personally, I think it's very optimistic because in Brazil, for instance, next please. The domestic flights will be recovered in 2022-2023. Next, but the international flights is still very, very far from 2019. Probably only after 2025, 2026, the international flights will be recovered at the same level of 2019. Next, please. Our main airport, Guarulhos, reflects this situation. This is the movement of October in this slide. The domestic is about 20% below 2019, but international is still low and very, very far from the pre-pandemic movement. That means that airport needed to be prepared for the possibility that air traffic will not recover either to its previous level or to its previous growth trajectory. Linked to the pandemic, I think there are other factors to this scenario. Airline consolidation, environmental concerns, and the most problematic for me, people can switch to train in short-haul routes. Here in Brazil, we have a lot of initiatives to recover passenger services by train. So this is a problem to the air transport to recover the ancient levels of the demand. I think that in order to recover demand, airports have a lot of challenges, and I like to highlight three of them. First is recover the sanitary credibility with sanitary protocols, layout changes, renovations at terminal building, and systems to monitor temperature and space occupancy, so that the passenger regains confidence in flight. Second challenge, airports must recognize the need to improve intermodal transportation, not just airport to train to airport. I refer to the last mile coverage services. It's very important. Airports talk about door-to-door deliveries. And this idea needs the integration of data from all business partners. And third, it's crucial that airports and airlines work together. I intend to detail this idea later. Well, as you can see, it's a really challenging scenario. And I try to understand how airports can overcome this adversity. Let's try to understand the perspective and challenges of revenues, expenses, and investments. Next, please. Okay. As I had the opportunity to speak, I think the key to the recovery of air transport after the pandemic is the collaboration between airlines and airports, specifically regarding aeronautical revenues. Will be essential. Attraction of new services, attraction of new airlines, and attraction of new passengers for existing services. To make all this possible, I think there will be an intensification of incentive programs for airlines, in line with what Fraport has been doing here in Brazil, but with some adaptations to the new situation. Airport incentive programs are one instrument to better align airport strategic development aims with airline scheduling. With this program, airports may offer discounts on certain fees, bonus payments, or joint marketing initiatives for a limited period of time to airlines. Airlines, in turn, introduce new routes, generate more passengers or cargo in existing flights. And the problem is to do all of this with regularity, punctuality, and operation consistency. I think the example of Fraport can be expanded to other Brazilian airports. In the case of Brazil, these problems have a great potential due to the concession model for airports we adopted. We do concession in regional blocks with main airports and satellite airports. New services linking satellite airports to the main airports made by the same airline can improve this kind of agreement and consequently can improve them and can improve the movement and can improve research revenues and progress at the main airports and also at the regional and feeder airports. This is very interesting because in Brazil now, some feeder companies are emergency, such as Two Aviation, Azul Conecta, MAPI. That means airlines that uses small aircrafts like Caravan or Fokker 47 to do feeder services from small airports to large ones. I think so. The airport incentive program is a huge tool to improve operational revenues. It's important to emphasize, I think there is a lot of economists here, from an economic perspective, airline incentive program can be regarded as price discrimination. So I think this is a regulatory issue and the academy can contribute a lot to the discussion in order to adapt the regulatory framework to this practice and improve the recovery trajectory. Still in relation to aeronautical revenues, I think that a potential source to be explored is the air cargo service. Since the COVID crisis began, air cargo has been the greatest importance in delivering medicines, medical equipment, and keeping the global supply chains on, mainly for the most time-sensitive materials. This has been done with dedicated cargo freighter operations and the utilization of cargo capacity in passenger aircraft. I would like to highlight three aspects that contribute to this cargo behavior. The first is the significant congestion on supply chains due to the restriction, the economic restriction in the pandemic period. The second is currently the low inventory to sales ratio. Is a consequence of the first one. Low values for the ratio inventory to sales are not good face events like Black Friday we have this week or Christmas. Also in this case, business may turn to air freight. And the third is the price competitivity. I will use a number, a Brazilian number. Last September, the average to transport a kilogram of cargo by air was 3 times the same to do by ocean. The problem is that here in Brazil, before the pandemic, this relation was 15 to 3. So air cargo here is now likely competitivity. Is for sure, none of these factors will remain after a post-COVID scenario. So I think it's time for airports to take advantage of this window of opportunity and formalize agreements with major global operators like UPS, FedEx, DHL, in order to provide services that add value to air cargo. Here in Brazil, the experience in international cargo handling, which was observed by the concessionaires that now operate the ancient INFRAWAY system, can help a lot in this process. More than showing a potential for resiliency in the airport sector, these facts point to a potential of new revenues for airports and also to a new investment profile. Let's talk now about non-aeronautical or commercial revenues. Whatever the economic scenario, commercial revenues will be fundamental to the evolution of the airport industry, basically due to the fact that non-aeronautical generation revenue can generate a greater margin for the revenue. Airport non-aeronautical revenue contribute about 40 to 60% to the total revenue, but the margin of these revenues are higher than the operational revenue, and they contribute something like 70-75% about the EBITDA. Some colleagues in this situation used to say that the increasing of commercial revenues depending on the increasing of the passenger satisfaction, the passenger experience. I am a little less romantic than this. I think the best way to increase non-aeronautical revenues has 3 steps. First, building a passenger database by collecting information about passengers when they log in to Wi-Fi. So the operator can analyze how different types of passengers use the airports. Second, communication with passengers in real time over Wi-Fi, SMS, mobile apps, and email. With this, the operator can deliver retail offers, promote services, and even also give important operational information about the airport. And third, measure retail conversions by measuring passenger traffic in specific retail areas. This is very important to understand the preferences of consumption of individual customers or even categories of customers. In short, investment in technology. Combining technological advances for commercial revenues with cargo logistics services, the airport itself can operate as an e-commerce platform. It's a different business that can bring to the airport in order to recover the ancient situation. Well, the other side, the OPEX. How will airports deal with their operating expenses in order to accelerate the way to the recovery. For sure, it's over the time when all non-essential contracts have either been suspended or postponed for payment. It's also over the time when essential contracts have been renegotiated to fit to the pandemic situation. But I think the trend for OPEX is the consolidation of some actions taken to adjust to the pandemic conditions. First, airports reduced the headcount, and they are more centralized and efficient now. They not go back to the old level of personnel. Now, the aim is not to make the costs directly related to traffic. Increase the traffic, increase the cost. No, no more. The goal now is to re-engineer operational process to increase the overall operational efficiency. For example, in some cases in Brazil, everyone is now responsible for the quality control process. There are no more people to perform second or third checks as in the past. As with commercial revenues, investments in technology will be critical to OPEX. I think the next few years will be dedicated to reducing operating costs over greater efficiency. And the key to this process is the evolution to the concept of 4.0 airport, with the intense use of 5G and ITS technology to reducing cost through greater efficiency, with digitalization going to the Airport 4.0 concept, the intensive use of 5G and ITS technology. I see this process had a lot of advantages, and I would like to highlight one of these advantages: the automation of ramp activities. There is a huge distance between automation levels at the terminal and automation level at the ramp. Automating the ramp allows optimizing service as follow me, airplane tracking, underwing services, and even noise control at the ramp. The automation leads to optimization of operation and consequently the costs. Additionally, there is an improvement in safety and security, very, very important issues in Brazilian airports, and also an improvement in the ACDM procedures. In short, about OPEX, management adjustments and investment in technology. Now, finally, some comments about CapEx. Evan, could you go to the CapEx? Next one, please. Okay. For CapEx, the common sense indicates that investment will be postponed or even eliminated. It's the common sense. It's okay. As traffic levels return to pre-COVID levels, a possible situation is that CapEx budget is still impacted by COVID. In the long term, This means that the current available facilities needs to last for longer. But I would like to do a little bit different assessment. I'm going to talk about CapEx in two steps. First is the nature of the investment, and second is the source of the money. To talk about the nature of investment, I'd like to emphasize a distinction I use. I divide CapEx into capacity and maintenance. And I divide capacity CapEx into hardware and software. Hardware is runways, aprons, terminals, and other buildings. Software is systems, equipment, and mainly technology. COVID's direct impact on CapEx was the postponement of hardware investments. The state of industry and the challenges of recovery led to focus on software investments in the short and medium term. And what investments are these? Next, please. To illustrate, I am going to use the example of AENA using very interesting work they developed called Innovations, Passenger Experience, and Sustainability Strategy. In this document, they present the following set of software investments. First, the Airport 4.0 to address the modernization of customer experience, including digital identity, the biometrics, business, sustainability, customer support, security, including environmental integration and smart service management. They are proposing a very interesting software called Smart Operations and Maintenance Management. This system relates the optimization of operation with management process. This increases the general performance with the use of new technologies. Another important issue is BIM, Building Information Modeling, program to concern implementation of new modeling technologies to make management and maintenance more effective. And the cargo digitalization. The digitalization of the cargo process will improve efficiency and quality. These investments, for me, fulfill a lot of needs. Improve the passenger experience, increase operational efficiency, increase commercial revenue, reduce operating cost, meet sustainability requirements. And very important, they delay the hardware investment. This does not mean that there will be no investment in hardware in the short or even medium term. There will be. And I think this investment will be on modal and logistical integration. Completing the investment pool in the short term, I think there will be some ESG-oriented investment, not only for the importance of ESG, but to recover the rating with the banks. I'll come back to this subject in moments. The CapEx trend in the medium term is to recover investment levels close to those of years prior to the pandemic. Next one, please. Yeah. A recent and very extensive study by ICAO shows that the need for CapEx until 2040 will be 2.4 trillion of American dollars. You can see in this slide the participation of items such as model integration, equipment, and other facilities like logistic tools and the total forecast. Sometimes I look at this slide and it looks like a contractors union advertisement. But I think the interesting thing is that they included the trends that I pointed out in our conversation, like modal integration, cargo, system, and equipment. And at the end of the day, the total investment should not be far from the AC forecast. Across some data from CAPA, data from SACI, from ALTA, we'll reach something like 2 trillion, something like this. So I think it's a good reference. This is from ACI. Due to what I saw as National Secretary of Civil Aviation, I think even in the medium and long term, here in Brazil, the software capex will have a higher participation than the world average. We are very, very long, very, very far from the state of art in terms of technology in airports. So we needed to improve rapidly this issue here in Brazil. Well, clarifying the question of the nature of the investment, let's talk something about the source of the money. Next please, I'd like to start by commenting this slide, where you can see the evolution of the asset betas of listed airports. As you can see, all the asset betas increased with the pandemic. Personally, I consider this graph the most representative of COVID impact on the airport business. Just to remember, asset beta is the beta of a company without the impact of debt. It's a measure of volatility, is a measure of risk. Also, it compares the risk of the company to the risk of the market. Okay, what does it mean? In short, current market evidence indicates that investors believe the airport sector is subject to higher levels of risk and volatility following the pandemic. So, in the most likely scenario, the sector cannot rely on traditional market investors, bank, fund. We need first to change this trend and go down with the betas. Alternatives to do this, I think we have at least 4 alternatives to get money and change this situation. The first alternative is to use the part of the technological investment made by itself. Next, please. How can I explain this? During some months, we conducted an evaluation of biometric identification in the airports of Santos Dumont and Rio de Janeiro. The evaluation of in Congonhas and Santos Dumont showed that the commercialization of the database for biometric ID pays for the system. So the marketing the database, you can get money to pay not only for Congonhas and Santos Dumont, but more than 10 higher airports in Brazil. I don't know how it happens in other countries, but in Brazil, if we could commercialize this database, all this biometric system in the main airports will be paid without public money, without to increase charge to the passenger. It's a very interesting issue. Some concessionaires are now claiming to ANAC to rebalance the contract in order to put this kind of system. And people, including me, we are trying to convince them to take money from the system itself. I think another source will be the passenger himself. It's not the ideal strategy, but is what we have now. The next, please. As you can see, according to ACI data, the fares charged to passengers at airports have been falling in real terms. The charge from airlines also have fallen, but due to the principle of joint work between airports and airlines, the increase of charge will fall on the fares paid by passengers. Next, please. And as you can see in this slide, the participation of airport fares in the total ticket price is still small, something like 5%. It's not a great source of money, but remember, we are talking about software investment. They are very, very low when we compare with hardware investment. The government must also participate in this effort. Next, please. In the case of airports and the concession, the renegotiation of contracts will be important, both to financial rebalancing and for making new investments feasible. In this slide, I'm showing the rebalancing situation in Brazil as something about 500 million US dollars in 2020. Probably this will be repeated in 2021 and 2022. $500 million by year. I am talking about $1.5 billion US dollars to rebalance contracts and to make feasible some new investments. In some cases, specifically in 2020, the case of Florianopolis and Porto Alegre airports was also a temporary increase in airport fares. Something in the line I just showed to you, temporary increase once the passenger fares is falling, to do a new source of new resource for investments. Another possible source of resources will be the new partner stakeholders. Airports redirecting their activity to logistics and working to be a platform for e-commerce will attract new stakeholders, new partners. Next, that will be able to finance this activity. Agreements with Alibaba, here in Brazil, Mercado Livre, and other logistic organizations can improve researches, mainly to hardware in terms of logistic infrastructure. In short, the short-term strategy is investment on technology in order to regain passenger confidence, reduce OPEX, increase operational efficiency, and increase the non-aeronautical revenue. Resources to do this. Some systems itself, like the biometric ID. Passengers, not good but necessary temporarily. Renegotiation of contracts, in some cases, public budgets, and new partners. Well, I think the battery of my crystal ball has just run out. So thank you for the opportunity and for your attention. If you have any question, please, I'll be happy to answer. Please address to Professor Rosário Macário. Thank you once more.
Thank you, Professor Dario, for your excellent presentation and overview. We will now listen to the three discussants, and I will start inviting Thiago and Nykiel to start the discussion. So, Thiago?
Rosário Macário, it's a pleasure to be here and nice. It's a really good pleasure to see a nice presentation from Dario. It's a colleague of ours here in Brazil, and we always talk about the evolution of air traffic transportation, how we can develop things to get better service here in Brazil. So it's a really nice to see the some of the crystal balls, some of the hints that he came from. So for me, it's the pandemic was really a complicated situation for all over the country and for all over the globe, and we divided the impact of COVID in two phases. One, we didn't know what was going to happen, and the second one, and then when the vaccination the vaccine start to get masked, boost people, and then we saw in Brazil 2020 was up and downs, the air traffic, transportation, because the people don't have much confidence to take a plane to go to the airport to visit their relatives. And then when the mass vaccines was implied to the system, their transportation is recovering really fast. And what we see here is that the domestic flights are booming because the people started to be in their homes for almost one year and a half. So they want to visit their relative. They want to go to have a vacation, and then the international flights are really complicated by now because you have a lot of restriction of the countries that accepts some vaccines that the government applied here, but now it's getting better. So I think that we have a good future ahead. The worst has gone, and almost here in the country you have 60 something of the people was already vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and some region about more than 70% of covered. So the pandemic is going down really good in Brazil, and I would like to talk about what the impact of the COVID from the contracts of the concessionaires in Brazil. We did. We was the advisor of the federal government to more than 50 concessions, airport concessions in Brazil, and I would like to show you of the audience some of the major points that we apply to this forecast, and they've only three or four slides only to have to add value of the representation, and I would like to have the presentation here really fast, and probably everyone is showing my screen, and this was what the forecast that we did on the specific of the sixth round of concession. And as you know, we here in Brazil, we have a really huge concession period here in Brazil, because we came from 10 years before we'd have no concession of airports, and now we are almost having more than 60 airport concession by the end of next year, 2021, 22, and then only to say to you about this. What was the impact of COVID on our forecast, on our revenue, on our cost, and then what we considered in these studies, that we have a baseline study that was a pre-COVID situation. Then we have 3 points of impact of the GDP. So the pandemic was hit hard on our country, and then you have naturally a shift from the curve because of the impact of the GDP, and then we applied a culture factors of reduction in PAX per capita curve. So what this means? So this kind of event that we are doing online a few years ago only would be possible doing by physically. So this kind of small culture factors of applying technology of the business environment. So we shift the curve of the baseline of this study, and then we have the third, the really important for the short term, is the restriction of the population circulation. So this came almost from zero at the beginning of the pandemic, and then we are gaining traction through the months after the mass vaccination was applied. So this is some rough numbers of what we were considering there. So in our opinion, the previous curve, the baseline of movements of passengers will not be get again, because you have three scenarios of conjuncture and moderate and structure scenario, and then these three possibilities we are obviously we are not going to get again the baseline, and then this what we consider, and then we have a moderate scenario, and then this have a really impact on the passenger demand, on the cargo demand, and this also the cash flow of the concessionaires went from a NPV of the South cluster in Brazil, the South Coast, based on the anchor of Curitiba, came from NPV from 1 billion to 266 of this new curve. So this is only what I would like to present to you, some hints of what we did here in Brazil. And thank you very much. I'm here to go further.
Professor, you're muted. You're muted.
Thank you, Tiago. And we move now to another Tiago, now from the European Investment Bank, Tiago Lopes, with an overarching view of these problems. Tiago, please go ahead.
Right, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. A small disclaimer in the beginning, of course, my opinion here is just personal. I know we're being recorded, so it does not bind the European Investment Bank. In order to do this, we would have to do an appraisal of the situation. But anyway, the opinion will be still very valid. Just one step back before we go into the discussion. I mean, we should not forget that the last 10 years before COVID have been the best for the aviation industry. In both of airline and airport profitability. I mean, airlines on average have never been so profitable as in the last 10 years, as well as airports. And I mean, during these 10 years, we have been assisting basically what is the play of market economics. So airlines have been consolidated, global airport operators have been created, low-cost carriers have entered the market with very low entry barriers. So I mean, we are basically playing in an open market. I mean, recovering to or to 2019 traffic levels means that we would be, let's say, living in a healthy industry. That is what everybody likes and desires. And our view, and my view, is that this industry will go back to profitability. So we'll go back to 2019 traffic levels and 2019 profitability, but in a slightly different shape. I mean, I share the opinion of Professor Dario that, well, the largest share of investments, maybe not quantitative but qualitative, will be definitely in IT and smoothening the airport process. So from starting from a, let's say, from a top-down approach, a bottom-up approach. So the investments in IT will basically optimize the airport capacity at the different subsystems, meaning trying to create a seamless passenger flow. It will not be easy because different countries, different blocks have different IT and data privacy requirements. But in general, the trend that we are seeing is that IT systems are being implemented much more than before in order to create a seamless passenger flow. And this means two things. This means that there will be higher non-commercial revenues because passengers travel faster with lower levels of stress across the airport, and therefore there will be more willingness to consume. I mean, don't forget that airports are the only place in the world where they can get undivided attention of people for 2 hours. I mean, I don't think of any, not even shopping centers, that passengers need to be in a certain place, in a certain confined place for 2 hours before boarding. So this has a huge, let's say, consumer drive. The second thing is, of course, rolling out IT systems allows for the airports also, and create seamless flows allows for airports to comply with the minimum technical requirements of the concessions regarding passenger level of service. So meaning that one of the key drivers for airport expansion is when airports are close to capacity, is that the traffic level, service levels are lower than C, or now, well, more recently, IATA optimum levels of service, meaning that, or triggering the need for expansion, for terminal expansions. And by rolling out IT measures or IT systems, I mean they managed to push back these needs for capex investments, at least for a couple of years. That's something that we have been witnessing. It also helps that during the pandemic, traffic has been a little bit lower, and by rolling out IT services, it means that the airports can balance the occupancy of the floor areas with adequate let's say medical recommendations, by providing it at 1.5 or 2 meters distancing, etc. I mean, on the longer term, I'm let's say not so optimistic about the industry and about the concession processes, but this is mainly because of external factors. I mean, aviation until now has been driven by a significant, let's say, a significant amount of available income, which is growing mostly around middle-income countries like China, Brazil, parts of India, Indonesia, etc. I mean, these new consumers are very price sensitive. I mean, you can see that low-cost carriers have now a very large share of the market, or even the majority of the market, in places like India, China, Indonesia, and even Brazil, where Gol and Azul combined are the market leaders. I mean, and this brings us to difficult situations that after COVID, everybody in the aviation value chain has basically little or no money. So, I mean, I know airports want to provide incentives to attract airlines, but airports themselves are a bit cash strapped. I mean, airlines are either receiving support from governments or having to pay high interest rates for capital, which does not help either. And everybody will be fighting for market share in the future. I mean, and on top of this, I mean, after we leave COVID, we have even greater, let's say, potential impact, which is the price of carbon. I mean, we might have just followed COP26 that ended in Glasgow just recently. I mean, and there is a commitment from all the aviation industry, so airlines, airports, air navigation service providers, to be climate neutral by 2050, and even more ambitious airlines and airports by 2030, 2035-ish. These means, and that either way, fuel will be taxed heavily, or the price of carbon will be introduced, which is another way of taxing the air transport, or some kind of revenue will have to flow from the aviation industry to governments which are concerned about the climate and environmental impact of airlines. I mean, this will drive airlines to spend more money, not on the services, but basically trying to renew the fleets a bit faster than they should have, because all the aircraft produce or consume more fuel, and they're therefore less efficient with higher price of fuel or price of carbon. And I mean, this is basically the new, let's say, the new framework where we will operate in the next couple of years. So these means that, I mean, hopefully for some, and not hopefully for someone, for others, I mean, the traffic forecasts that existed before the pandemic, I mean, from my view, they're a bit aggressive when we see them from this point onwards. And because of this price sensitivity of customers from middle-income countries, added with increased price of fuel, and also the rollout of synthetic aviation fuels, which will not be easy, and at least in Europe will be mandatory, and traffic forecasts will be a little bit lower than previously expected. I mean, we are seeing this already in Northern Europe, with other issues like flight shaming, etc. But also in Southern and Eastern Europe, where let's say double-digit traffic figures now are in the high single digits. I mean, we also talked about air cargo, which is a very specific sector which actually did not suffer during the pandemic. I mean, it did not suffer as a whole, but there was a significant change within the market segments. I mean, the value, let's say the unit value of our air cargo decreased significantly. It changed basically from high-end electronic and pharma to low-end medical products and stuff like delivered by Amazon. But I mean, it still showed strong resilience. But I mean, it will definitely be one of the sectors that will be affected by higher price of carbon, because these are mostly older aircraft and traveling long distances. I mean, having said that, I think I've touched upon most of the subjects. So I'm now open for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tiago. Excellent overview of the main problems as a reaction to Dario. We have now the third intervention, which is from Saulo. Saulo, are you there? I hope you are.
Yes, I'm still
Yes,
here.
you are. Saulo da Silva from ICAO, and there are already some questions about ICAO here. But so Saulo, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Macário. Good morning, everybody. Well, most of you, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's always good to see some old friends and my preferred professor in the world, Professor George. Anyway, but I would like to take a more, let's say, optimistic view of the situation. You know, I think we in aviation, we used to say that when life gives you a lemon, make it a lemonade, right? And I think there are some lessons that we have all to learn of this situation. And I have some questions, Professor Dario, later for you, because I'm interested to know your views on that. But we have been living before the pandemic time lots of years, and Thiago correctly mentioned that aviation has been performed really well compared to other industries. And we have done lots of investments on safety, efficiency, to improve capacity, to improve security of the system, to reduce our carbon footprint. We invested a lot on that. And now we had this situation that put us, the industry, basically to a halt, right? We went down. So it was a dead stop for our industry. And like others mentioned, we never saw something like that before since the first flight. The point that I'm trying to raise here is the good lessons learned out of this. Despite the investments we have been doing in everything, all different key performance areas, one thing that was mentioned here before by my previous colleagues, that we haven't paid a lot of attention, and now we are thinking more about it, that is the resilience of our system. How we can maintain the continuity of operations, even if we have a situation like we had the pandemic. We were definitely not prepared for that. We have been talking about resilience, but we never invested a lot in resilience. We always provided more investment to other areas. Like I mentioned before, safety, security, the efficiency, environment of the system. So we never thought much about resilience, and now we are facing what resilience means. Our industry was not prepared for a crisis like that. And Dario mentioned before on the future investments that obviously some of them will not be as expected, because now we are in the recovery mode of the industry that will take some time to happen. But at the same time, if we want to recover, we have to invest. We have to improve the efficiency of the system. We have no option. And Dario correctly mentioned one of the possibilities is to invest in new technologies so we can improve the efficiency of the system. And today we talk about digitalization, we talk about the use of 5G, and we use expressions like connectivity, and we have to improve that if you want to improve the efficiency of the system to allow the industry to recover from that situation. And the good thing is that aviation is well known between or among the different industries as a vector to recover from crisis. We are good on that, our industry. Not only the airport community, but the aviation community in general, including the navigation service providers, communication service providers. We are good to help the society in general to recover from crisis. So the lesson learned out of that for me is we now will pay more attention to the resilience of the system because we never did before. We always took it for granted, let's put it this way. But then I come back to the point raised by Dario before that says, well, we have to improve the efficiency, but we have at the same time to reduce operational costs. And I was, a week ago, actually, I was in Dubai in the Tech Explore conference, and I had a chance to speak there at the conference. And I was talking exactly about that. And I was telling people, I said, look, now we are here in Dubai in this conference. We have all the health measures in place. But my point is, are we prepared? And because here we are in a forum of the airport community, my question to all of you from the airport community is, are we prepared for another pandemic, not caused by health problems? And I'll bring the speech that you mentioned on investments on digitalization, 5G. This will also opening windows or doors for another halt in the industry. It's a cyber pandemic. So are we prepared for that? How much are we investing to improve the efficiency of the system with digitalization in the system, but at the same time to avoid a new dead stop of the industry due to a cyber attack? We have seen, and we are seeing right now, actually, if you go to the media, you will see that only the aviation industry receives 2 ransomware attacks per week. This is only in Europe. 2 ransom attacks per week. And this is increasing. We are investing billions of dollars in security of the system. At the same time, the cybercrime is making trillions of dollars. So they are ahead, much ahead of us. We are start thinking about using artificial intelligence to improve the efficiency of our system. Cybercrime has been using artificial intelligence for the last 5 years at least to perpetrate attacks on us. And now the aviation industry is becoming a target. Thank God we still are not well evolved to allow a cyber attack to have a huge impact on safety of operations, but has other impacts in the industry as well, and can bring a local, national, even a regional stop to the industry again. So I would finish with the question to Dario before, because he mentioned that we are focused on reducing the operational costs, but at the same time we have to improve the efficiency, invest in new technology. How the airport community sees this balance right now? They're reducing the costs, the operational costs, but at the same time they need to invest in efficiency of the system. It's a question for all of you guys, so we can talk a little bit about it. Thank you for the opportunity, Professor Macário. Thank you.
Thank you, Saulo. Let me add also to your question, another question coming from the floor, and of course to all of you, which is a question from Guilherme Zapola, is asking or is stating that one difficulty in advancing Airport 4.0 is overcoming the cultural barrier of decision makers to accept this technology. how does this barrier can be overcome? That's a big question. Huh? So I return to you. So who wants to come forward? Dario, Tiago,
Okay.
Tiago? Yes, Dario, okay.
Me? First, thank you for the comments. Regarding Saulo considerations, I think two things must be explained. The first, I think that the cybersecurity investment came together in the package of technology investment. It's something like you do in the building. When you build a new terminal, you put some security elements belong to the project. I think it's not possible to share more the cybersecurity from the IT investment. The reality now requires that we work together. It's a very important part of the technology investment. And the second explanation about the trade-off between reduce cost and improve operational efficiency. I believe this trade-off is not between A or B. The final balance is more important. When you make the investment in technology, at the same time you are creating conditions to improve the non-operational revenues. It's very important to pay attention about this. As Tiago Lopes said, when you improve the operational conditions at the facilities in the terminal, you create conditions to go down with the non-operational or commercial revenue, because the time spent in the terminal will be lower than the ancient, the stress will be lower than the ancient times. But when you invest in technology, you may create conditions that the airport can operate as an e-commerce platform. So you need to explore all of these alternatives, and the trade-off in the end of the day will be the final balance among all the initiatives you take. How to convince people about technology? I think we need. I suggest something like we are doing here in Brazil, making the pilot projects like the biometric ID. We began with one airport, we go to the second airport, and so on. The e-gate is another example of a pilot project. We began the e-gate project for passport at Guarulhos, and after that we went to Galeão, up to create the conscience that the e-gate is better than the usual procedure, and currently in all of our international airports we have e-gate. I think this is the path I take in order to convince people.
Thank you, Dario. Any additional comment from Tiago, Nykiel, or Tiago Lopes?
Yeah, I think naturally, maybe this being a bit dogmatic here, but I think naturally people are technology friendly because it basically brings them a lot of benefits, like traveling through airports, taking less time, and being independent. So I mean, I remember the last flight I did pre-COVID. I mean, I transferred through Munich or Zurich, and I managed to not talk to anyone, which was well, some people might find it very, very useful. But the key issue here is not, well, it's also cultural, but it's also about regulation. I mean, there are countries and blocks of countries which are much more open regarding personal data, and other countries where data is seen as private, and it has a cost. So the thing is, I mean, it then depends on what position countries have. For example, in Europe, the European Commission is very strict about this. I mean, data belongs to the people who own it, who have it, and once you provide it to someone else, you should pay a price for it. And that's basically the reason why the big American technology companies are being fined or being prosecuted by the European Commission. And curiously, not at national level, at the Commission level, because they're basically taking data from people with or without their consent and selling it as a high value items. And the same thing might be applicable, of course, at a smaller scale, but for airports as well. I mean, not a problem when going through an e-gate, but when you're using biometric measures like, let's say, scanning my eye or my fingerprint, at that point, I'm a little bit more concerned, because this is a huge private issue, and then it tails down with what Saulo just said. I mean, if a cyber criminal gets access to my fingerprints or my digital eye, then I'll be really, really concerned. So I mean, it's not just cultural, but also well, there is a huge, let's say, regulatory influence on how technology is rolled out. I mean, there are countries who are being more adventurous. I mean, Portugal and Brazil are actually one of them, and together with the US. I mean, Europe is doing as much as possible. But for example, I mean, to be quite honest, I wouldn't like to go through some non-democratic countries and provide them with all my biometric data. I would really feel really uncomfortable. So I mean, just to add on top of the cultural issue, the regulatory issue as well.
Yes, in fact, there is one question, and that goes directly to Saulo. That is, what is ICAO doing about the privacy concerns in relation to these automatic technologies? Are there new standards being prepared, or what is going on, Saulo, if you can say?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Actually, we have been talking about the subject for a while, but it depends on what you're talking about. You're talking about privacy or confidentiality of operational data or personal data. That's a different story. Because personal data, we have, for example, in Europe, the GDPR, they have already the regional initiative to take care about that. In terms of operational confidentiality or privacy, whatever we call about the data, we have been debating what is the best way to do it. And there are several ways and several different lines of thought. And I'm a researcher, so I'm doing my research in one of them. And I'm trying to prove to the community that we have an option that is easy to implement, it's easy to develop. But obviously, this is my personal view on that. What ICAO is doing is debating with 193 member states and the industry to verify what can be acceptable for states and industry in this regard. Like I mentioned, we already have some regional regulations in place. GDPR is a good example. In US, they are talking about the same thing. And Thiago mentioned something very interesting, that this really depends on the culture aspects as well. If you go to Shanghai today, you will notice that everything is monitored. Biometric is already implemented. You don't use a ticket to get into the metro or the train or the bus, because everything is monitored 100% of the time, because it's part of the culture, and they accept that because it's part of their way to maintain the security of the population, and the population embraces very much that approach. Other states don't like very much, like Thiago mentioned. I would not like to see my personal data on the hands of people who should not have access to it. But what in terms of ICAO, this question is directly for ICAO, is what we are doing. We are debating with the 193 member states in the industry what is the best way to proceed to guarantee the confidentiality of data, mainly the operational data. We don't go down to the personal data because this belongs more to a national regulation than a global regulation. But obviously, they impact and they have relationships, obviously. But at this moment, we are debating, and there is no new standards in place right now. There is no new procedures in place right now, but this is being discussed by the international community for sure.
Yeah, Thiago, Nykiel, another issue which is not only related with culture, but also to the balance between which are the automation benefits and the capex that it is required. So how is this balance in particular in a scenario where we have private investors in the flow?
It's a really good good question, Macário. Only to get on the previous questions, for me the part of the technology can to be here, and then we have to apply all the system, all the flows to this new reality. We are used to build airports who have more hardware, like Dario said, but I think that this 5G and this whole traffic data consumption of the globe, we can have a really good approach to have efficiency. And every time that we have more efficiency, more process getting easier, the cost automatically went down. And then always we have a really good approach from how the technology we can apply from the operational view, and then the commercial area also. It's when you will think, when you add technology, it's our holistic view, and then we can get benefit from this holistic view, and then we can plug every data together, and then we can get better airport. We can get much more efficient airport. We can increase commercial revenues from this. Talking about the question about automation. This is a really good point, and here in Brazil we are in this technology automation process of this big concessionaire that came to Brazil the last 10 years, applied a lot of technology automation to get the flows doing in a more efficient way. And then we saw what was before this new area of concessionaires to operate airports, and then with them have a really good impact on how the flows are going. But I think that there is a lot of room to get better airport with much more automation process to the passenger, to reduce the operational times, and then the passenger can be more relaxed, can use their time to buy stuff, to experience the things in the airport, doing whatever they want. And then we are going to, in the next 5-10 years, we are going to be challenged to see much more technology, much more efficiency than only to build airports, to get more bigger airports, to have hardware investments. I'm 100% agree with Dario and Thiago and Saulo that this is going to, the technology is going to be our key role in the next years.
Well, indeed, the technology and all the investments related to that are very much over the table. But in fact, within the technology, we have currently a lot of artificial intelligence being used in several systems. And in some of those systems, the artificial intelligence is going, in fact, to enable us to forecast and to estimate delays and other aspects. The question is, besides the investments, are we really in the getting in the sort of the limits of safety and security in the utilization of these aspects? And the question is for all of you. So who wants to step forward?
Well, I can start at least.
Yeah, okay. I expect that.
I can start. This is a given, definitely. We all know that. We are using much more connected solutions. And that you correctly mentioned at the beginning, right at the beginning, we are investing a lot in digitalization. We are living what we call in aviation the digital transformation of the aviation system. And this will happen no matter what. It's happening right now and will continue to happen. What we have to do now is to be smart enough to allow that evolution. At the same time, we avoid a new digital pandemic. That's what we have to do. We cannot start investing just connectivity without going back to the basics of the Chicago Convention, for example, to the basics of the Chicago Convention. It talks about trust between the different participants, and to trust the participants and to guarantee the resilience of the system. This requires investments as well. We cannot achieve that without investment. We all understand that now we are under recovery mode, as you probably have heard. In the ICAO Council, we have the Aviation Recovery Task Force that brought lots of recommendations to the industry, including the airport industry, to recover from this moment, to allow travel to get back where it was before. Some optimistic people say that by 2023 we'll be back. Some pessimist people say that by 2024 we'll be back to the numbers of 2019. But sooner or later we will be back, because we have crises, but aviation helps economies to solve crises. But I think this, in terms of the investments in technology, this will be done. We just need to be smart enough to not invest and open new doors for problems that can stop the aviation again. So my claim to everybody is, whenever you invest, think about resilience. Is resilience by default. You have to think about that, because if not, you may be in trouble that you didn't plan before. So pay attention to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Dario, anything to add on this?
No, first, I love the claim. So.
Okay, so the big question seems to be, where is the money then? And there is some ping-ponging between what is ownership factors and the willingness to bring the private money on board, and the government's aid on the other hand. So these are the two ping-ponging situations under which the resilience of the sector, and in particular of the airports, is being decided. Isn't that so, Tiago Lopes?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Thank you very much for the provocation. Now, being on the other side of the fence now, but having been on the other one previously, I mean, I think we can see clearly that, especially for Brazil, the design of the concession processes is absolutely key. for the success of the airport and for the airport system as a whole, and for the airline business in the country. I mean, we saw the first, let's say, the first round of privatization, or the round zero, was that concession in Natal, and the first round of concessions of Brasilia, Guarulhos, and no, a second.
Viracopos.
Yes, Viracopos. Yes, that was a concession with a number of design flaws. And the first one was that for Natal and Viracopos, there was definitely an over capacity goal in the concession contract, which bidders had to deliver. And this was done on the basis of very, very aggressive traffic forecasts, which then was proven to be a mistake. And on the basis that, at least in Viracopos, the home-based airline would basically, Azul at the time, would basically build a major hub there. Well, the hub is still there, but of course now Azul has operations in all the other airports in São Paulo as well. And Viracopos did not perform it as it was expected. The third floor was the low level, or the low share that was allowed for foreign investors to bid for those airports. With only 10%, of course, the major players in the market, like Fraport, you just mentioned, Vinci, ADP, Zurich Airport, Aena, which are now in Brazil. At that time, they refused to bid. With only 10%, they would have absolutely no management control, and hence the expertise of building very complex infrastructures like passenger terminal buildings, or having the knowledge to provide airline incentives like Professor Dario mentioned, or the knowledge on how to operate very complex infrastructure like airports efficiently, was not there. So basically, and we saw that clearly at the time I was with Latam, and it was clearly seen that those airports, they came off with shaky starts. Later, these flaws were basically corrected, and we saw later, so after Brazil also went through a crisis, and after the concession contract was designed in such a way to allow foreign private investors to have more of a controlling share, that the bigger the, let's say, heavyweights of airport management companies came in, and they really provided let's say, they came in with their expertise, with their financial power, and we saw that all the capacity developments that were expected were brought in time, more or less within budget, and they open up to and that provided excellent level of service. Of course, the initial round of Brazilian airport concessions also had the issue that they had to be open on time for the Olympic Games, which put hugely financial stress and construction stress on those companies who get, or to which the first airports were awarded to, in order to be able to build significant infrastructures in such short amount of time. So I mean, the cash outflow was massive and was not compensated by aeronautical revenues and commercial revenues as well. So I mean, the lesson here is well, take one step back, think very thoroughly what your concession contract is, what are the obligations of the concession contract. Don't make airport companies make unreasonable and overcapacity investments, because I mean, either the traffic forecast is not there, or there will be no experience in implementing those required infrastructure. I mean, the other point that I would like to talk about, and which relates to the IT infrastructure, is that, of course, airport concession companies, or airport management companies, international ones, they do what's mandatory in the concession contract. So if it's not mandatory to provide, let's say, paperless check-in, or let's say e-boarding at gates, those private companies will only do it if it brings clear revenues in the short and medium term. So I mean, again, concession contracts must see very well into the future, which is a bit like looking into a crystal ball, but see what are the emerging trends in terms of airport operation and airport management. Because if you don't do this, you are stuck. You are stuck with old practices and sometimes old equipment and infrastructure. I mean, just to finalize, but I mean, I remember that I was just a couple of months ago in a very important European airport, and they had ground handling equipment which was moving on diesel. They were producing lots of smoke, etc. Was when I went to the baggage handling room, and it was really full of smoke, very uncomfortable, etc. Oh, but yeah, we are well. Yeah, it's well, we don't have any incentive to renovate our equipment. Yeah, but I said, look, in Brazil, this has been done almost 10 years ago. I mean, there was a requirement in the concession contract that when the airports were concessioned out, ground handling equipment had to be electrified. Why don't you do this here? Yeah, well, in the end, the guy said, well, nobody obliged us to do this, so we just stick with old practices. So, so it's just to say that it all depends on how things are regulated and clearly written out and agreed, because best practices can happen everywhere and not exactly, sometimes not where you expect them to be.
Well, best and worst practices can happen anywhere. But in fact, in what concerns concessions, and this is, I think we have an evidence all over the world on how much the scenarios and demand estimation can be a driver of the collapse of a concession, and which calls for the intervention of the regulation. That is, shall we continue to have demand estimation and scenario building in the hands of the candidates to a concession? Or should this be taken in hands of the regulator and say, well, this is the demand estimation, and then now you apply with your business plan and with your project. All over the world, we have numerous stories of consumption bankruptcy and returning to the state because of this. And sometimes it is, to an extent, almost unbelievable, like demand levels 4 times higher than what is the reality. So what is your view on this? So Tiago, you as a consultant, you go through these aspects very often, and you, Dario, as a regulator, you receive them very often as well. So what you both can say about this?
Well, I'm suspected to talk about this because I think Thiago, Nykiel, no, I think one of the first things we make when we are as national secretary with all the team is change the philosophy of the concession program. We change from demand to level of service. The last 3 rounds and the next round that Thiago have already talked about is conducted by the level of service. There is some indicators the concessionaire must obey, and the whole of the agents is to follow these indicators, not regarding demand. But we still have some huge problems to solve. I think we work well in the first problem, that is Galeão. I think we have 2 problems to solve, very difficult. The first is Campinas. In order to rebalance between government and the other concessionary to do a new public contest. And we'll have the problem of the new Galeão. Galeão is a problem solved up to 2023. After 23, they needed to pay the concession fee. And as I was talking about Rio de Janeiro, currently, Santos Dumont Airport has more movement than Galeão Airport. So it's very, very difficult that Galeão can pay the concession fee again. I really don't know how to do now with Galeão, because the solution of 2017 was developed under the supervision of the control organs of the union. I don't know if these organisms will agree with a different solution. There will be I think only a magician to solve the next Galeão problem. You're really completely right, Rosário, when you said the demand-oriented concession is a high risk for both, for concessionaire and for government. And the solution is to change from demand-oriented to level of service-oriented contract. But I really don't know how to solve our other problems. And certainly my colleagues at the government now are asking for help.
Nykiel,
Yeah,
what do you have to say on this?
This topic is really, really good topic, Macário, that you just brought. For me, we always are searching for balance. So in our experience here, when we are doing airport concession with a low traffic determination, so airport that has less than 1 million passenger a year, so the traffic of one airlines, it's a huge impact if these airlines move for another airport that's nearby. So when we are doing isolated airports with a small demand, it's really important to the government to have a balanced risk demand. So it's really important that the government set up the curve, regulated the level of service, but take off the risk if there is something that is not the hand of the concessionaire. In this case of I don't know, airlines move for another airport because it's not profitable enough. So, but on the other hand, when we're thinking about big airports with more than 5 million, I think that the right approach to do it is getting the demand by the concessionaire, by the bidder, because it's aligned the incentives from what we have to develop the infrastructure and get the not the liberty, but the freedom for the concessionaire to develop commercially the airport, what they think is the best way to approach the airport. So for me, this is a really, really important point, because here in the government in the last 50 years, we don't have before the airport privatization, the concessionaires, we have just a little investment in the airport. So the government should not be taken for granted to develop the major expansion in airport, because they're not good at. So when we shifted for the private companies, a huge investment of airport, and this was really amazing here in Brazil. And then and we think that we with the government align the contract to write the contract of the concessionaire to the regulator, that we can have freedom to them to explore the airport, have a demand, the investment triggered by the demand by level of service. So only expand the airport if we have less with the level of service is triggered. And the other point really important is that there is a lot of items on the contract that that the government align the expectation of revenue. So the government, they're not taking all the money on the first time of the concession. It's a variable revenue from the 30 years of concession. So this align what we think is the best approach to get a little bit of shared risks and do it together, because the contractor agreements are really complex, and then they change by time to time, because we are in a really moving society, expanding our technology, and then we cannot know what the next step of what the society is going to have.
Thank you, Tiago. Well, let me try to wrap up the main content of our session, and I'm going to use an expression of Saulo. I would say that airport resilience is an issue with many lemons. So, which means that we have a complex lemonade to do, and without, I think, much doubts, I would say that there are three vectors or three challenges that are key in this issue, which is, first of all, and now on top of everything, the environmental issue, which is a big pressure over the airports, and the fact that the airports are at the center of a heterogeneous network of actors with very different natures, but they are all interrelated, and interrelated in a dynamic where we have winners and losers. But the other two aspects that are challenging all this are security and safety in one hand, but on another hand, pricing, because all these agents are connected through pricing. So we can talk about air transport pricing, because there is pricing everywhere in the relation between these agents. And of course, we are in a difficult moment for the sector, because it is very likely that only by 2024 we will start seeing the same levels of demand that we had before 2019. But there are other aspects that are coming to complicate all this. That is not only the role of the regulation and how much the regulator should change in face of this, and in face of these new actors that are coming in, and old actors but with new perspectives, which is the case when we have interventions of private investors in the old actors. So the actor is functionally the same, but with a completely different perspectives. And we see everywhere emerging labor problems as well, with as an impact of the crisis, not only in airports, but also in airlines, or maybe mainly in airlines. And so pricing is indeed a crucial instrument, and to maintain all these highly competitive issues. Fuel, of course, remains an issue, and it will remain an issue for a long time, but it is extremely important that we are able now, in this disruptive moment, that we are able to draft the most possible realistic scenarios, and at the same time be able to, in fact, maintain a strategic vision and of what is the position for each airport in terms of the in terms of competition in the overall network. So airports cannot be seen anymore as monopolistic agents. No, competition is there, and it's there at the regional level, at the national level, but also in the dynamics with the actors that are surrounding the airports and that are connected with pricing. So I think we have a fantastic lemonade that will enable us to bring you new seminars, and in some weeks we will come up publishing a program with seminars on different topics. And as I have said in the beginning, this is an ambitious network that has started already with an international nature. And we are very happy with the results of this seminar and how much we could discuss and bring together the theoretical knowledge with the practical evidence and with the experiences from practice. So I thank you all, the Dario Lopes, for your key intervention, but also to Thiago, to Saulo, and to Tiago Lopes as well, and also to all the participants that have raised interesting questions and that have fed my intervention with that. And we hope to see you very soon in other seminars and interacting with our AirObs network, where we also intend to provide some training elements and some other elements of knowledge transfer to the air transport community. So thank you all very much, and I thank you also to Evandro, who has been guaranteeing that we can all talk together and that everything runs smoothly, and also to all my colleagues of the AirObs network, Professor George, Professor Eddie van der Voort, Professor Wouter, Dr. Sven, Professor Rosário, Professor Vivian, and so we are much more than it's visible in this panel. And so we certainly hope to have new opportunities to interact with all of you. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can I
Bye-bye.
take a picture?
Yes, of course.
If everyone wants to open the camera.
Yes, please. Professor Eddie, Professor George, please open the camera.
My camera was open.
But I cannot. Oh, you are there. Okay. George, where are you?
No micro, George.
Okay.
Perhaps in another page, but I'm here.
Okay, you are there. Okay, perfect. Wouter, Sven, I don't know how many can fit, but
I'm here as well, so.
Okay, that's good. So Evandro, you are the operator of the machine. Put us all with nice faces, please.
Okay, I'm still struggling here. Yeah, it's done. Thank you.
Very well.
Okay,
Thank you.
perfect.
Bye-bye.
Very well.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you. Thank you.
Thank you.